Hey all, and welcome to the first of the Treebeard logs. Oh dear god, that was a pun. Anyway, I'm going to be making these video logs every so often where I just talk to you guys about basically whatever. Whatever I happen to come up with. Usually about animation, maybe about games or something, but today I'm going to talk about the nature of good and evil in cartoons. See, I watch a lot of other reviewers and stuff, and when I hear somebody talk about a two-dimensionally evil or good character, I usually hear the word cartoonish. This obviously comes from a very real trend in animated features where there will often be clearly delineated good and evil to the point that characters will refer to themselves as such. So, as a writer, this feels like poison because this is not how this works, you know? At least I believe that people generally are not objectively good or evil. So why does this happen? Well, people tend to think, rightfully so, that animated works often have a greater influence on children. So there are groups that want to make sure that there's a clear and positive message sent to them. So what they would do was that, okay, well, stories involve conflict, so what should this conflict be between? Okay, we'll have we'll have a good guy and we'll have a bad guy, and they'll make it very clear which is which. Through this, the hope is that the character they should be emulating is obvious. Like, the kid will see that Superman is the good guy and Lex Luthor is the really bad guy, and Superman is the guy that things work out for, and Lex Luthor gets his ass beat because he's a jackass. In theory, this works out really well, but this is actually kind of problematic. And even then, wait, that's not how it works with Superman and Lex Luthor anymore. But anyway, moving on. The first problem I have with this is that this isn't really how human beings behave. Excuse me. This isn't really how human beings behave. I mean, people don't generally call themselves evil sincerely and with pride. Because that's kind of an assessment where they tell you that you're bad and you shouldn't be doing anything. And the things that you do are bad. Everything about you is bad. Nobody thinks that. Nobody's brain works that way. And even with that aside, it's just weak characterization. When the motivation for a character to do something is just because they're evil, it just doesn't ring true. Evil is not a cause. It's not a goal. It's not even a method. Evil is an assessment of whether or not someone's actions are ethical. It's qualitative, not quantitative. It doesn't explain a character. It just gives you a file to put them under. Let's have a quick example of what I mean by this. Say you want to have the standard, I want to take over the world goal for a villain. Why does this villain want to take over the world? If the conversation ends with, because they're evil, what does that tell you? Jack fucking shit, that's what that tells you. You don't know anything about this guy other than people think he's enough of an asshole to call him evil. And then it just ends there. There's nothing else to them. They're just evil because evil. And what's funny is that in a lot of animation they try to parody this concept, but it's kind of parody. It's gone in a weird parody loop. Like, the thing I think of is like in Power Rangers, where they would have like organizations devoted to the concept of evil, like the Intergalactic Alliance of Evil that was in Power Rangers in Space. And despite that, Power Rangers in Space is actually really good. But yeah, you'd have this like you'd have these, the parody has gone in a loop to the point that it's parodied so much that now it's the standard, which it really shouldn't be. And the thing about that is, again, nobody would openly identify themselves as evil because that opens you up to be a target, you know? It's just dumb. But luckily there is a way to fix this. There is a way to fix I'm evil because evil. when you're describing a character, because whether the character is good and evil should be left up to the audience. Take that out of the picture, because it's a judgment. That is not a character trait. Why does this person want to take over the world? Is it because they think the nations of the world don't know what they're doing? Is it because they're so horribly insecure that they need to demonstrate their superiority over all others? Is it because they believe there's some sort of interdimensional horror coming to Earth and the only way to stop it is to unite the world together, but they're convinced they won't do it willingly? Yeah, these are just groundwork, but they're answers. They're like real quantitative answers. They're like, this is something that is measurably true in the narrative. Suddenly, with these sorts of answers, the character has more dimension and seems more like a person. They have goals, they have attitudes, they maybe even have groundwork for a backstory. They're infinitely more compelling than evil because evil. And even with all that aside, you can probably go, well, Treebeard, come on, man. It's for the kids. You gotta teach them what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Thing is, I'm not even sure it's really effective as a teaching tool. The thing that immediately comes to mind is Wander Over Yonder. It's a show on the Disney Channel created by Craig McCracken. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's actually pretty funny, but when looking at it from the context of like, okay, this is something that's supposed to be for kids, because they do pull the like ludicrously good for the sake of good and ludicrously evil for the sake of evil thing in Wander Over Yonder. And the thing about it that's really funny, and that I'm not sure was intentionally funny, is Lord Hater. Lord Hater is like about as two-dimensional evil bad guy as you can get. He like says he talks about evil like it's a career path. And in that same way of that parody loop type thing. And he's this like big mean skeleton dude who like shoots green lightning out of his hands and shit. And he's like, and he's trying so hard. He's so wrapped up in his virility and his masculinity that it's just hilarious. But the weird thing is that in being like ludicrously evil, he is actually the more compelling character than the ludicrously good guy, which is Wander. The thing about Wander that's really weird is that for like 10 episodes of the series, he didn't even have like a character flaw. It was actually something that I thought was really obnoxious. I'm like, God, the guy is fucking perfect. He's like, I mean, people often cite Superman as the worst offender of this. No, Wander. Wander was the worst offender because for like 10 episodes, he's a perfect goody-goody two-shoes in every conceivable way. His only flaw was that he was too good of a goody-goody two-shoes, and even then, by some bizarre coincidence, everything would just work out perfectly for him in the end every single time. And it still happened like that 20 episodes in. It's just, dude, oh my God. Craig McCracken, I love you, man, but what even with this guy? It's just, yeah. We didn't even have a character flaw until 10 episodes in, where he was like kind of petty about like who's been to more places than this like tourist lady. And even then it seemed like he lost, which was great because characters need to lose. We care more about characters who try and lose than characters who win all the time, you know? That's one of Pixar's storytelling principles. If you look that up, look up Pixar's storytelling principles because they're really great. But yeah, he would win by coincidence and he would win all the time. Like, there never seemed to be a time where he lost, and I was like, yes, when he lost. But then at the end of that episode with the tourist, they all said that he technically won. I'm like, damn it! It was so close! So close! But yeah, in contrast, we see Lord Hater, who constantly keeps trying to accomplish his goals and fails miserably. And he ends up being the more sympathetic character. Just imagine that. The mean skeleton guy who shoots green lightning bolts is the more compelling character. It's just, wow. I mean, yeah. Good and evil is weird. Good and evil is an odd concept, and I don't think it's something that you should really implement in a story. There are people who've done it, and if you're going to implement it in a story, it should be like a separate concept. It should be like, it should not be a character trait. Good and evil are not character traits. They are judgments. They are judgments made by the audience and possibly made by you, the writer. But if you're going to do this, in fact, no, just don't do it. don't explicitly delineate good and evil. Let the actions speak for themselves. Let the audience decide who's good and who's evil, because when you have the bad guy, the explicit bad guy, be the more interesting character than the good guy, then kids will start going, oh, well, maybe he's like, well, he's cooler, so being evil must be... It sounds so ludicrous, but they're like, oh, but evil is so much cooler. I've actually heard people say this. Like, hear them say that being evil is so much cooler. I'm like, do you actually hear yourself right now? It's ludicrous, and yet, yeah, it kind of backfires on itself. But yeah, don't take any of this to mean that I think that cartoons are evil and that they're corrupting our children's and we should burn them at the stake or something, because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this in terms of, like, in literary terms. This is just talking about how to write and how to tell a story. But yeah, good and evil in cartoons. I want to get away from the cartoonish stereotype when it comes to those concepts, because animation has a lot of potential for really great storytelling. Hell, it's lived up to that several times, and I think it should be given that chance again. So yeah, until next time, catch y'all later on the next Treebeard log.